Welcome back to Unveiling the Truth. I'm your host, Never.
And I'm Nelly, and today we're going to be going over the sacrament of marriage, continuing our sacrament series.
Yep, so without further ado, let's go unveil the truth.
Okay, so before we get started, first we want to start off with wishing you a Happy New Year for 2023. We wish you great blessings and great successes and hope it's a really good, happy one.
Yes, and also a Merry Christmas because we are still in the Christmas season. I was telling my mom the other day, we Catholics have more fun.
Oh, yeah.
We have Christmas until after Christmas.
Yeah, and it's funny because everybody likes to take down their decorations and stuff after, the day after Thanksgiving or Christmas, a couple days after Christmas or something like that. And when actually what they don't know is that the Christmas season actually starts on Christmas. And it goes all the way for the 12 days, all the way up until the Feast of the Epiphany. So technically, you're supposed to leave up your decorations and keep celebrating Christmas until the Feast of the Epiphany.
Yes.
So keep that in mind. Also, so before we get like we said, we're going to talk about the sacrament of marriage. So before we get started, Nefertiti's going to lead us off in a prayer.
Yep. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's do a Hail Mary because of the wedding feast of Cana.
Okay.
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Nefer.
You're welcome.
So today we're continuing the sacrament series, and today we're going to talk about marriage, which is a very sensitive topic. It's like a big topic, and it's a big sacrament, but then there's a lot more that goes to it than people think. A lot of people like to just think that marriage is just a normal thing when it's actually a huge covenant and contract of the union between two Christians, man and woman, in the eyes of God, which can't be undone unless through an annulment. And it takes a lot to have an annulment because the only way you can get an annulment is if it was an unlawful marriage. And 9 times out of 10, it's not unlawful. So yeah. Okay, so first let's just explain what it is in the eyes of as a sacrament. So the reason it's a sacrament is because once again it's a covenant. And you know how, and we talked about in the confirmation, how when there's a covenant they change their name. Well, this also happens too because to establish that covenant, the woman changes their name to the husband's name to show that they're one person. Yeah, their last name, because they're become one person. So basically what it is like a permanent union between the man and the woman in the eyes of God. And they don't just get married, they become one person. And it's it's an example of the Trinity because there's the groom and the wife and then there's God, the head of the marriage. So there's all three of them and they're bonded in that. And they're not just getting married to each other because they love each other and vowing to protect each other and stuff like that. But when they get married, they also take a vow and a covenant to help each other get to heaven. To help them with their faith, to be there for them, to protect them. And there's just so much that goes into this. Yeah, and so we're going to read just really quickly some of the paragraphs from what the Catechism says about matrimony. And so reading from... thank you. Starting from 1601, the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life is by its nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. This covenant between baptized persons has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament. And then we move on to 1602. Sacred Scripture begins with the creation of man and woman in the image and likeness of God and concludes with the vision of the wedding feast of the Lamb. Scripture speaks throughout the marriage and its mystery, its institution and the meaning God has given it, its origin and its end, its various realizations throughout the history of salvation, the difficulties arising from sin, and its renewal in the Lord in the new covenant of Christ and the church. Yeah, and that's kind of a good way, because they say that God is the author of marriage. Yeah. Because this goes back to Adam and Eve. Because he made Adam, and Eve didn't feel that completion. He needed that, and that's why we say that you complete each other in marriage, and that's why it's such a beautiful thing when you get married, and so because you give each other fully to each other in that, and that's why it's such a beautiful thing if it's done the correct way. And Adam needed that companionship, and so think about it. God gave him Eve. And he said Eve was very good. And then Adam was so happy with Eve. He was not happy until he had Eve. God could have given him a child as a companion. And yet, no, he purposely gave him a wife first. And then the children came along from that. So that kind of gives you an idea that God had the plan and structure for marriage from the very beginning. Yeah. And this goes into right now where it has been proven time and time again where kids with both mother and father have the most success in the future and are raised the best because God intended it to be that way from the very beginning with the structure of the family making it man and woman because men and women are compatible with each other. They complete each other, you know? Even in the most intimate ways, they reflect each other how they're supposed to be and how they procreate, which is one of the big reasons for marriage is procreation. Yeah, and then even how it says right here,
that it begins with the creation of man and woman in the image and likeness of God, and that we see that from the beginning they were one, because the sort of, I guess, symbolic way that we see how man and woman become one in matrimony today is how literally they were made from one. In the, what was it that God took, like,
the rib.
The rib. God took the rib to make Eve out of the rib of Adam, to be like, you guys are one flesh now.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the spiritual bond that carries through that sacrament.
And that's why it's so important that you don't divorce, because it's like, in the eyes of God, you are one person and you can never be undone, you know? And that's why it's so important too. That's why so many things are so much better inside of marriage. Yeah. Because God made it specifically that way, because it's a beautiful thing. Because if you have relations outside of marriage, you are basically giving yourself to somebody who isn't worthy of you and not the way God intended, and then you carry that baggage into your actual marriage, and you always remember that person, because when you have relations with somebody, it bonds you and it mends you. That's why it's supposed to be inside of marriage.
And what is it that St. Paul says, and I think it was Corinthians, where he says, women love your husbands, and then women obey your husbands. Husbands love your wives, and then wives love obey your husbands.
And that's the way God made it. And it wasn't even supposed to be anything condescending or anything like that. It's like, you are like this like treasure of like fruitfulness and nourishment, and you are going to be perfect for the children that you are going to produce. So I'm going to give you a husband to give you the head. And like, you know, when they sinned, and he said, you will, you know, wander the earth in turmoil, but he put Adam as the protector and the guider, and he made Mary like the nurturer and the childbearing Eve. Sorry. Well, I guess Mary is the new Eve.
Sorry, you're right. There you go, typology.
Typology
101.
But he made Eve the nourishment, and that's what we're supposed to see reflected in the family structure today. Is the father supposed to, he's supposed to love and nurture the kids also, but he's supposed to be the guider and the protector and the provider, and the woman is supposed to be like the heart of the house.
Which is why our race fell not when Eve ate the fruit, but when Adam ate the fruit.
Oh, see, that's a good thing. Everybody likes to blame Eve, you know, but the thing is that Adam was right there watching.
Talk about misogyny.
Well, no, everybody likes to blame Eve, but think about it. She was like, well, you know how women are like over emotional, they like try to think things out and stuff like that. So the devil was really easily able to persuade her, and that's why he chose her instead of Adam.
He did emotional manipulation on her, being like, oh, you know, God's hiding things from you, blah, 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 this and that. Whereas Adam is the one who should have reasoned and been the head and made the ultimate decision. But like, Eve, like, maybe let's not do that.
Let's not
go to the tree and like, let's go eat the bananas over there.
And when you think about it, she said that Eve turned to Adam and gave him the fruit. That means he was right there. He didn't do anything. So honestly, and him as the protector, that's why God specifically said, okay, you're going to protect your wife from now on, because you didn't protect her. When the serpent was tempting her.
It's like, now you're really going to have to
protect
yourself.
And that's another reason, you can say that's another reason why all priests have to be men, because men are the protectors of our souls.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's very, very true. And so, let's continue on with what the Catechism says. In 1604, God, who created man out of love, also calls him to love, the fundamental and innate vocation of every human being. For man is created in the image and likeness of God, who is himself love. Since God created him, man and woman, their mutual love becomes an image of the absolute and unfailing love with which God loves man. It is good, very good, in the Creator's eyes. And the love which God blesses is intended to be fruitful and to be realized in the common work of watching over creation. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And so that's kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about companionship. How like humans, we are innate, like we're sociable beings, and we yearn and we desire for that sort of intimacy with each other. That's why we need friends. That's why we need our families. And this is why we need, marriage. Is why we need marriage in the human race. Albeit, through marriage to the church, like through holy orders, or marriage to another person that's going to help build you in your faith.
And like he said, to be fruitful and multiply, that's why in the Catholic Church it teaches that when you get married, you have to be open to life. You can't take contraceptives or anything like that, because think about it. God said, okay, Adam, I'm giving you this wife. Now that I have this solid structure and an important and a good environment for the children to be raised in, now you can go be fruitful and multiply. That's why it's so important to have men and women, because God intended it that way from the beginning, because he said man and woman was the best base structure for the raising of a child as my child, to raise him in a good way. And I think that's such a cool way. It's like, good, now that I have this foundation with you two, and you two love each other and complete each other, now you can bond with each other and be one and raise this child,
And it also, something to point out here is when it says that, since God created him, man and woman, their mutual love becomes an image of the absolute and unfailing love with which God loves man. What makes the sacrament of matrimony interesting in the sense is that it's a covenant, like we've been talking about through this whole series, that the sacraments are all about promises and covenants with God. But this one is a covenant between two people and God. It's a covenant it's like a three-way covenant.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the man and the woman make a promise to each other, to love each other, to respect each other, like, whatever it is they say in the vows. I don't know, I'm not married, so.
Enriching for poor, for better, for worse, sickness and in health.
That, yes. To the promise to be with each other and to create a family together, because that's also part of the vows. But they're also making that promise to God.
Yeah.
And so they make that promise to God, like, we're going to stick with each other. We're going to create the family like you want us to. We're going to build each other in love for you.
Right. And when you think about it, there are so many, kind of off topic but in topic, it's like there are so many things that are easier inside of marriage. Raising children inside of marriage, supporting children inside of marriage, supporting a house, working is so much better when you're married because you have that support system. And it's like easier when you have another person, And like I said, raising kids, having kids is so much better inside of marriage because you have that help from both sides,
Yeah, well, it's kind of like we talk about this a lot. Like, a lot of the matrimony stuff alludes to a lot of what we talked about in the What Destroys a Family videos.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like, the reason why there's so much like trash in today's society is because we've destroyed the family. And family begins with conjugal love between a man and a woman.
Right. And that's why it's a joining and union of conjugal love. And something else is that it's so important to think that God is the head. You're an example of the Trinity. God is the head. And because God is the head, something interesting that a lot of people don't know is that a deacon can perform a wedding. Because the thing is that the priest, if you want a mass, you have to have a priest or a bishop or whatever. But the priest and deacon are actually just the witness. God is the celebrant. Yeah. God makes it a sacrament because you're making that covenant with him and he joins it. But the priest is just the witness. Same with the people. And another thing you can say is that the reason this is so important because Jesus is the bridegroom and then the church is the bride. So when the husband and wife get married and there's a bride and the groom, you're representing the church. Yeah. Jesus and the church combined. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's such an important thing.
Yeah. And so, Nellie had pulled up this Bible verse from Matthew chapter 19. It's verses 3-9, which basically talks about how, there were laws of divorce and stuff back in the...
Because back then, marriage wasn't a big deal. You could divorce your wife for, not making you a good sandwich, Well, literally, that's what they did.
VeggieTales?
I did. She didn't make me a good sandwich. No, but seriously, if a woman disobeyed her husband one time, he could divorce her. And that's just how, unequal and how poorly treated women were. So when Jesus came along and said this, it was like, whoa, he's making marriage something important. He's saying that woman is equal with man.
And it also talks about how, this has been, we'll read it right now, how this has been around since forever. This is the way God intended it to be. But when Jesus came, he kind of established it, all right, y'all are ready, this is what we're going to do now, And so reading from Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 and on, some Pharisees approached him and tested him, saying, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause whatever?" He said in reply, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate,'" like you said earlier. Mm-hmm. They said to him, "Then why did Moses command that the man give the woman a bill of divorce and dismiss her?" He said to them, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, unless the marriage is unlawful, and marries another, commits adultery."
Yeah, and it means that the marriage is unlawful means that they can get an annulment because there was certain circumstances, say she was keeping something from him before the marriage, he was a mafia leader or something, and she didn't know that and he got married, so she could
or it's crazy heavy domestic abuse. Violence and abuse. Yeah, exactly. That's also
right after they get married.
That also makes the marriage unlawful because he's not keeping with his part of the vows and the covenant has been it's been broken or it's wasn't really there to begin with.
Right. And then another part where God shows the importance of marriage is at the wedding of Cana, and this is 16:13, and the Catechism, it says, "On the threshold of his public life, Jesus performs his first sign at his mother's request." Think about that, the first miracle he performed at a wedding. So that means it's a very important
at a wedding and at the request of Mary. That's all I'm saying.
Yep, there you go.
That's why I prayed the Hail Mary earlier.
During a wedding feast, the church attaches great importance to Jesus' presence at the wedding at Cana. She sees in the confirmation of the goodness of the marriage and the proclamation that thenceforth marriage will be an efficacious sign of Christ's presence. So through Christ being at the wedding, you can see that Christ is involved in your marriage. Yeah. And yes, being married is an amazing thing, and it helps you, it helps you in life, that be it a good sacramental marriage. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be a beautiful thing where you bond with somebody and you have that companionship and you have somebody to help you through life and you have somebody get you to heaven, but it's also very difficult. It is very difficult because it's a sacrament. Of course you're going to struggle. And there's this one priest and he said there's 3 types of rings in marriage. There's engagement ring, there's a wedding ring, and there's suffering. And that's what goes into marriage. And everybody laughs at it, but it's true. There's a bunch of suffering, and and I know it's funny, but it's true. And then you can, God, you can use that suffering to like be a martyr and offer it up, because everybody struggles in their marriage because you are two people and you both have your own ideas and stuff like that. But that's honestly what keeps people together, is knowing that it was mended by God, and it's a sacrament and covenant to God. So by putting God at the head of your marriage, you can use that faith to get through the hard times in your marriage,
Yeah.
So use that faith to get through the struggle. Instead of just being like, oh, well, this is just a piece of paper we used to get married, like, justice of the peace marriage, and then just be like, okay, I want to divorce you. You have that covenant and vow to each other to protect them.
Yeah, and that's why it's also important to really think about like who you're gonna marry.
Oh yeah.
I was watching this video with Ben Shapiro the other day where he was talking about like you need to approach marriage with it in mind. Like you can't just be like, oh, I love this person, I should like maybe we should get married. Like you should approach the idea of it by being like, okay, do I want to get married or do I not want to get married?
Yeah, exactly.
And now now I'm going to look for someone who's willing to commit to that.
Yeah, and marriage is a vocation.
Yeah,
marriage is a vocation. Yeah, exactly.
People are called to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very difficult.
Yeah, and it's like, pray for your future spouse right now. Pray for your future spouse right now. Oh my gosh, there's this prayer too. Is it Saint Anne?
Saint Anne is
Saint Anne. Yeah, there's a novena to Saint Anne, and it supposedly helps you find your soulmate. And they say that supposedly everybody who's prayed it has been married, has like found their love.
Pray to Saint Anne. Pray to Saint Joseph. Pray to Saint Raphael the Archangel. Pray to Saint Anthony. We're doing all the novenas.
Yeah. So that's the sacrament of marriage. That's how deep it is. So we see that God intended this marriage from the very beginning when He made Adam and Eve get married, or made Adam and Eve together, and then that was like the marriage. That was like the first marriage. Well, no, but that was like the first marriage because because He like instantly loved Mary, and then so you see that He had that plan from the very beginning to have.
He absolutely loved Eve.
What did I say?
You said Mary.
Oh my gosh, Eve. I'm sorry.
The old Eve.
Old Eve, yeah.
Not new Eve.
Yeah. So he obviously had that plan from the very beginning and wanted it to be that way before having kids, and that's the whole reason marriage is not only do you love each other, but it's to have a good solid foundation for procreation. Yes. And so that's why you don't have any relations outside of marriage, because why would you give yourself to somebody who's not worthy of you, And that's, the person's worthy of you in the sacrament of marriage, because you make that covenant to each other to always be there for them, and then you give yourselves to each other fully on the wedding night,
Yeah, because theologically the purpose of, the conjugal act is for, intimacy between, man and woman, between husband and wife, and also for the sake of procreation.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's why relations shouldn't be an, extra marriage thing. Like, it should be within. It should be an intramarriage thing.
Because it's such a beautiful, deep thing. Because you're literally joining with each other. So so now we see that was God's plan from the beginning. So that's why it's a sacrament, because it was God's plan from the beginning. You put God as the head of your marriage, and also thus the head of your household, and you raise your kids knowing God and loving God
under His head.
Was it, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord?
Yeah, Jeremiah.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So it's like, so you put God as the head of your...
Not Jeremiah. One of those two.
And when you put God as the head of your marriage, I heard it almost always succeeds.
Yeah.
And something else to look at is that, this is kind of off topic, but it's also kind of on topic, is that we see the divorce rates happening when contraception and abortion came along. Yeah. So when contraception and abortion came along, that's when all the divorce rates happen, because it takes away the beauty of the marriage. Because think contraceptives, it's like, okay, I see you as an object instead of, instead of me having a covenant with you and having that intimacy with you, I see you as an object. And then the abortion is like, well, children aren't important, so I'm going to abort them. And then look, the whole reason God made the marriage is for procreation. So if you're having an abortion, then what's keeping them together? Because the children are not important, so why should they be important to each other? Yeah,
and then staying on topic, off topic, on topic. It's also like, I kind of think, especially nowadays in today's society, where it's like when people just, they start having relations before even getting married, while they're dating. They move in together while they're dating. Yeah. Where it's like, then what's the purpose of getting married?
Yeah.
When we live in a society that's like that, why even get married in the first place?
Yeah. And think of all the heartbreak it puts you through before you get married. Like somebody say, when you have relations outside of marriage, because you do mentally and physically bond with that person, that those memories...
Breaking up with them is like the absolute worst.
And then those memories are like carry on to the next relationship, and even their marriage, it's baggage, because you're with this person, yet your mind's wandering back to that other person who you love. Yeah. And so it's really hard. So that's why you need to be very special who you give your body to, because everything stays with you, because that's the way God intended it. So that's why it's a sacrament, because
on that note.
So God intended it that way. It's a covenant with God and to each other, to love each other for always and help them, and for better, for worse, for sickness and health, for richer, for poor, to always be there for each other. And you put God at the head of your marriage, and it's going to make it so much easier in your married life.
Yeah. So I would say that's pretty good.
And marriage is basically the foundation for all of us now, and it gives you a perfect example of like patience, what is it? Love is patient, love is kind, you know, all that
from
stuff.
Corinthians 13.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you understand why this is an important sacrament in the eyes of God. And like we said, you know, with the covenant, you change your name. That's why the woman takes her husband's name, to show that they're one person.
Yeah, and save marriage, save the family, save society. Bam!
Yeah, let's go.
That's simple.
Let's go, because without marriage, the society would be like, it just fall apart.
Well, I mean, it already is.
Well, no, but also when you think about it, it's like, with no marriage, what's a moral guide?
What do you mean?
Like, because marriage is like the structure. Like, it starts everything. So without the marriage, everybody's just free to, like, you know, do whatever.
Yeah, because, well, like what we were talking about, you know, what destroys the family.
Yeah.
It's like, you know,
because the parents'
destruction of the family is what leads to the chaos and turmoil in society. And like we said, you know, the head of that is marriage, the structure of marriage.
And think of all the mental scarring that all the kids go through who don't have parents and who have divorced parents, because they don't have that enough love and attention, and they're not raised correctly. Because they don't have both figures. So that's why it's important. So thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed.
Yes, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Unveiling the Truth with Nafra and Ellie. And check out our other platforms, which is down on the link tree below. And yeah.
Oh wait, I think I forgot to mention one thing, is that there's also a specific witness at your marriage. Like, yes, the priest is the witness and the church is witness, but you also pick a specific person to witness your marriage and like write it down on paper.
Just read Romeo and Juliet. And
yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching. We're praying for you, and keep that fire burning.
Bye.